Good morning, saints.
Good morning.
Happy Sabbath. My message this morning is a message that I've meditated on for probably 1 year. I got this inspiration when I was in the village in Kenya with Jeff and Idri and Sharon. And I thought I would look at this story to share with you. And it is based on a story that happened to me in my childhood. The title of my message is, therefore, Walk on the Beaten Path. This story happened on our farm, which has a river. Every family in my village has a river front that belongs to that particular family. So it happened on this river called River Amboro. I was about 14 years old. And just to give you a perspective of this river, I think Brother Jeff has walked to that river. And I didn't ask him for permission to share some of these photos. But this is our village home, where this is when we arrived with Sharon and Idri and Jeff, and just a few moments after we arrived. And that's my mom over there. She's about 90 years old now. And I visited this home for the first time because I was born in the city and I lived in the city when I was about 13 years old. And I used to hang around that tree. It's a fig tree. And under that tree, it was a small tree, I used to hang around there and take a walk down to the river. But each time we had to go as a group because the place was like a jungle then. It was really densely jungle-like. And this is a guava tree that I used to pass on the road, on the way to that river. And this is the river that, this was just about an hour after we arrived when I took Jeff in the evening to see this river. It's a place I used to like hanging out at. But my mother was not very, very relaxed when we went down to the river. No. And one day I woke up in the morning and after breakfast I announced to everybody that I'm going down to the river. And my mom said, "Are you going on your own?" I said, "Yeah, why not? I'm a big boy. I don't want anybody to tell me what to do." And as I walked down to the river, she stood outside the door at that fig tree and shouted at me as I went down, "Just walk on the beaten path." And those who know my mother, she never stops at one instruction. She kept going, "Just walk on the beaten path. Just keep walking on the beaten path." And I kept going, and I kept going. And the more I went, I could hear the echo, "Walk on the beaten path." And the path was actually a beaten path. But there are some places which looked like that. And the story happened around that area. That place was really dense jungle, and I wandered off the beaten path. And I went inside and I started exploring. I lost my bearing. I couldn't even know where I was. And then, suddenly, at that place where, on the right-hand side at the top there, where you're seeing those two cows, white and brown, I reached around there. And what do you think I saw? It's a good guess. Well, this is what I saw. I saw the largest leopard that I've ever seen in my life with its young one. and the tail was going and hitting the ground, and I just stood in front of that leopard, and I froze, and I didn't know what to do. What would you have done? And I respect these animals because it's like she read me. She looked at me and she saw that I was probably harmless. And I was just right there in front of her presence. But she just gave that big yawn. And the tongue came out, the pink tongue. And immediately, it's like I felt some power within me, and I bolted and I ran as fast as my legs could carry me back to the beaten path. And somehow I found it. And I went back home. And when I got home, I didn't tell anybody the story until much later. And I realized that Mom was right when she said, just walk on the beaten path. These animals now have moved further on to Masai Mara because of the encroachment of people farming and cutting down the forests. But you see, walking on the beaten path has been something that has featured probably throughout the Bible. Now, the story I want to tell you about is the story of Ruth. Ruth's story in light of the Torah, which actually means a way of life. And remember, Jesus said that I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am that Torah. And no one comes to the Father but by me. Now, according to tradition, this book or story of Ruth was written by Samuel the prophet. It was written around 1160 years before Christ. And the story starts very simply with the words, and it happened. Now, when a story starts with the words, and it happened, in Scripture, the rabbis say that a disaster is about to happen. And this is confirmed by the same sentence when you keep reading, which says, there was famine in the land. Yet a story with such an unpromising start can also have a hidden secret hope. And this story happened in the days when the judges judged, in the days of the judges. And if you remember that refrain that in the days that the judges judged, everyone did what was right in their eyes. They never cared for authority. They never listened to anybody. They did what they thought was right. And it is reported in this story that actually there was famine in the land. And the story can be looked at as a historical piece. And just that's all you can see in it. But it has been described as the most beautiful short story ever written. You can check that. It is the most beautiful short story ever written on this planet. Just imagine, written 1,000 years before Christ. It can also be looked at transhistorically to transcend all history to our present day. It can be looked only as a moral story, or a story that precedes all moral issues. It is a human story, of course. And it is a true story. But it is a story where God is not absent. It is a rich literary piece. And the more you read this story, is the more you get engrossed in it. And the story says that a man from Bethlehem went. And in scripture, when you see that a man went, that he went, the Midrash, which is a commentary of the Bible in times of oral tradition and written tradition before they started writing, they tried to comment on all those together. It's called the Midrash. They say when you see that he went, know that there is an adventure going to happen. And this is true because even in the story of Moses, Moses' father, Jochebed, Aram, went from the house of Levi and went to take the daughter of Levi, Jochebed, as a wife. And in that encounter, a child was born, Moses, the first savior. From the action of that man who went. And in this story of Ruth, there is another man who went. And he is called Elimelech. And a child will be born, the grandfather of David, another messianic figure, actually the Messiah's grandfather. But the story says that this Elimelech, at that time when there was famine, he went to sojourn in the land of Moab. And the listener will quickly connect that that is a no. How could someone leave the land of Jerusalem, the promised land, and go to the land of Moab? What a treachery. Was not Elimelech a lord in Bethlehem? Was he not a man of importance and a rich man, we are told? Because his wife Naomi says that he was a very rich man. In fact, we are told that what Job was to the east, Elimelech was in the land of Bethlehem. Should he not have stayed even in famine? But let's look at this name Elimelech. You know, the writer of this story doesn't want you to miss any point. Everything in this story has been measured, and it is there for a particular reason. And nothing has been left out which should be inside this story. And nothing is there which should not be there. It is a short story, remember? Elimelech is interpreted as royalty will be mine. In fact, Elimelech, if you remember, Eli on the cross, when Jesus spoke and cried to God, he used the word, Eli, Eli, my God, my God. So Eli means God. And Melech means king. My God is king. This man, Elimelech, has taken, so to speak, the name of God. How can this man who has got so much faith in God now live to go to another land of false gods? But we are told that it is interesting that God uses crooked lines to write straight. And God uses crooked people to fulfill his purpose of the kingdom. And the account starts so badly. It is a sad story. It is not a story that has hidden things in it. Everything is laid bare. Because we are told that the people of Moab, where he's going to, Moab, they were born of an incestuous union. There was incest when the daughters of Lot gave him wine after they had escaped from Sodom and Gomorrah, and they thought that they would not meet any man, and they went and lay with him, and they ensured they had a progeny from him. And the two girls, one of them gave birth to a boy named Moab, which means taken from my father. And the other girl had a boy named Ammon, which says, son of my kinsman. Now these are the ancestors of Moab and the Ammonites. And they had degenerated into cult-like idol worship. In fact, they worshipped a god called Molech. And they had a temple prostitution going on. And when the children of Israel came to go to the promised land, and when they passed there was an incident, remember, where they were warned not to participate in those kinds of rituals, but they never listened. And so Elimelech, by choosing to flee to Moab, fills the pious reader with loathing and revulsion. How could someone fall so low? How could someone deviate so far from the beaten path of the Torah? And this Moab brings in the name of Ruth the Moabitess. It is a word, a name that is not to be held with pride. It's almost laughable to be called the Moabitess. It is a derision. And this name will echo throughout the story. And what sounds like an ignoble name eventually will become a name of nobility. It will be a name that you'll be proud to be associated with. And so the story begins in a moment of crisis when an individual gets away from it all by fleeing. You know, sometimes it reminds us of our own lives, where things may not turn exactly as we hoped. You know, sometimes as human beings, you may plan things and you may invest in your business, or you may do some enterprise that you think will make your family prosper. But the more you invest, the more you lose your money. And you may find yourself in a situation where after losing your business, you find that probably even your marriage is now on the rocks, and your wife or your children leave you. And yeah, as if that is not enough, you may find yourself in a situation where you are diagnosed with a terminal illness. And as if that is not enough, you may suffer death in the family. You know, life has a way of becoming very, very hard. Suffering is real. And so Elimelech finds himself in such a situation where things just don't work, and everything he owned just dissipates and disappears. And he turns to his wife and children and he says, honey, I think we have to do something about this. And they discuss it in their home that probably the best thing to do is to leave and to go to Moab. You see, the land of Moab was attractive. It was 3,000 meters above Jerusalem. I mean, feet. It was a very lush, green, mountainous area. It had good climate, and everybody looked at it, and it was standing up and somewhere you would admire to go to. And that's where they settle on. They start going up, and that's where the story begins, that sometimes you think you are going up, yet you are going down. It's like a seesaw. And this seesaw in their life begins because Elimelech, his wife Naomi, and his two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, leave, and they go and they arrive in Moab. And in Moab, the plan is that he will live there shortly as a sojourner, and he will hide, and he will try and make out a living and recoup what he had lost, and then go back and invest again in Jerusalem. But you see, sometimes our plans don't work the way we expect. We plan things that I will do this and I will do that and I will take a loan here and I will invest there, and things will work one day. But the more we do that, the more we realize that we are sinking deeper in a hole. And this is exactly what happens because death visits the family and Elimelech dies. And after the burial, the sons look at themselves and they realize that now they have far too gone to go back, and they decide to settle and mingle with the people of Moab. And there's when it becomes a bit tricky, because when we go and settle with the things that are not of the beaten path, we may find ourselves in a situation where we are forced to compromise in order just to survive. And the two boys marry Moabite women. Mahlon marries Ruth, and Kilion marries Orpah. And you know the story that the two boys die, one after another. Just imagine what this family was going through. And this woman, Naomi, is left to pick the pieces. This lonely woman is at the point of desolation. She is probably at the lowest point in her life. Have you ever sunk that low in your life? Yes, there are people who have sunk that low. People who have lost everything, all their family members. She is like Job when he lost everything. In fact, one writer said that what Job is as a male, Naomi is as a female. She is also like Jonah, who tried in vain to escape the mission given him by the world. One can also not think of the children of Israel themselves who found themselves in Babylon, in a strange land. Remember that song where it says that there they were by the rivers of Babylon, and the people of Babylon tell them, "Tell us about your God, share your story with us." And they said, "How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land?" And they wept when they remembered Zion. Yes, you may reach a point where you will forget your God and you cannot tell your story and you cannot even sing your song, and you sink into this depression and this moment of darkness when everything seems to fall apart. But the story says that Naomi does not give up, and she arose one morning and decided to go back. This thing that had started as a precipitous fall, when she went up, now takes another turn of the seesaw, and she goes down to Jerusalem, but in actual fact, her life is taking an upward turn. Naomi arose. The verb there is to return, to go back. Even in the Bible, there's a guy who arose. Jonah arose, but he didn't go where God asked him to go. He went the opposite direction. The question is, when you arise, where do you go? Do you go back to the beaten path? Or do you go like Jonah on the opposite direction? Jonah left and went, and he must go to the land of Nineveh and prophesy to the pagans there. But now we must leave the land of the pagans and go back to Jerusalem. You see, this story has got so many parallels, and there's a lot of symmetry, and there's a lot of characters that are going to be introduced in the story. But the important thing is that God is in control. In the two accounts of Jonah and Naomi, faith in God is central. Almost reminds you of the prodigal son who said that I will return to my father. Yes, I'm not going to sit here and eat what the pigs are eating. I have sunk so low, I have squandered all my resources, I have wasted all my inheritance, and I will go back to my father and say, Father, I am sorry. Take me back. And he found the beaten path. The same spirit fills the two stories. Their literary style is the same. And when Jesus tells this parable, it seems to be reading the story of Naomi. Yes. On the way back, Naomi finds that he cannot actually drag her two daughters-in-law with her. And she gives them an opportunity to make their own decisions. And she explains to them that it's not going to be easy. There's nothing I'm going to offer you in Jerusalem. And life there may be even harder. You're better off going back to your parents. I've got no other boys to give you to marry you and have families with. And Orpah chooses to go back. You know, the Bible is not a place where you will not find stories of conversions, especially on the road. Remember Abraham and Isaac on the road to the mountain where they were talking and they were discussing what is to pass, and Isaac is asking questions, and in that moment Isaac has a chance to turn back. And Jesus also with his disciples on the way to Emmaus is speaking to them and teaching them these things on the road to Emmaus. And Naomi is speaking to Ruth and is telling Ruth the reality of what her life is, because Ruth does not understand. Ruth says, I will go with you. But Naomi says to her, Ruth, you don't understand. I'm going to the land of Israel. There I will have to observe all the commandments, and they are hard. But it is interesting that Ruth's answer does not mention anything about the commandments. She says, where you go, I will go. Where you spend the night, there I will spend also. To Ruth, what matters is the relationship that she has with her mother-in-law. That is what takes precedence. And Naomi says, our people have received 613 commandments to fulfill. And Ruth says, your people shall be my people. Again, she doesn't even mention anything about those commandments. And Ruth says the third thing, that among us all idolatry is forbidden. And Ruth says that your God shall be my God. And in this, Ruth and Naomi find themselves walking back on the beaten path. One in spirit, one in love, one in purpose. Ruth continues and emphasizes her word with an oath. And she says, may God do unto me thus and thus, if I will not stick with you to the end. And it is interesting that the name of God that she employs there is not the name Elohim, which is a God of justice. But she uses the word of the God Yahweh, who is a God of mercy. She seems to say that I have nothing to meet the requirements with. I cannot keep all those commandments, but I rely on the mercy of this God. May he have mercy on me. And Naomi attaches herself to Ruth. Ruth attaches herself to Naomi, her land, and her God. She acts gratuitously without counting any cost. She acts because of the love that is between her and her mother-in-law. This selflessness that she gives up everything to go with her mother-in-law is what stands out in the story. She can only speak the language of love. That's all she has ever known. It is interesting that this story, it's written long time ago like that, can actually bring this theme of love. But who was this Ruth and who is Naomi? Ruth, in the story, looks like she is the proselyte, the one who is converting into a community. She wants to join this church. She wants to join your family. She wants to be your friend. She wants to stick with you. That is Ruth. There's a Ruth in every member of the community right now who just wants to be your friend. And Naomi is the church, is the people who receive her. It is the community that is walking on the path, who must let her come in, and who must guide her, and who must help her, and who must love her back. When a Christian meets an unchristian, that is Naomi and Ruth meeting. When you meet an atheist, someone who doesn't even believe in God, and you welcome them and you become friends with them and you do not judge them and you just become friends, that is Ruth and Naomi. They return to Bethlehem. But when they arrive in Bethlehem, the Midrash commentary says that when they arrive, the whole town is in agitation. It is stirred. The town is packed. They hoped that they would sneak in. Have you ever been in a situation where you just want to sneak in? You don't want people to see you because you've gone through so much that you don't want anything going on for anybody or anything to do with anybody. You just want to be left alone. And hoping to sneak in, they find that this was the wrong day and everybody's in town. The Midrash says, why was everybody in town? And the answer is that it was the day of the Omer, when the first fruits are brought. They had this festival where they brought the first fruits after the harvest to thank God for a bountiful harvest. But another commentary says that when they arrived, the burial of the wife of Boaz was taking place. And this character Boaz is introduced in the story. And Boaz, we are told, was a prominent person, and everybody wanted to attend the burial of his wife. And we are told in the story that it is interesting to those who are listening and reading and observing, just like in the story of Job, in this vantage position, that even though Job is mourning his departed wife, and Job has got this moment going when he thinks that everything has just crashed in front of him, yet when he's burying one wife, the first wife, another one arrives, the future opens, yet he's not yet aware of it. And the people focus on Naomi and they look at Naomi, and Naomi is recognizable to them. They knew Naomi very well. And they say, is this Naomi? Have you ever sunk so low and gone through so much hardship and trials until when people meet you, they ask, is this brother so-and-so? You can go through so much suffering until you change. You look different. And Naomi looked different. She had gone through so much. Her face was wrinkled. Her clothes were not that fashionable. She was just that. You could tell that she was somebody who had gone through a lot of problems. And Naomi, we are told in the story that she raises her voice in lament. She cries out and says, do not call me Naomi. Naomi, which means my delight. But call me Mara. Mara means bitterness, because my life has been very bitter. But she calls God in that statement Shaddai. She uses the name of God, Shaddai, the El Shaddai, which means El is God, and Shaddai is the one who stops, and Dai is suffering, the one who stops all suffering. He sets a limit to your suffering. Naomi seems to count on this attribute of God, that he sets a limit to our suffering. Yes, there is a time when your suffering will come to an end. It is like when Jesus cries at the cross that, my Lord, and then it says it is finished. There is a time when it all ends. She has come full circle. The movement from Bethlehem to Moab and back to Bethlehem has happened. But the commentators are saying that, there's another problem. They have arrived at the barley harvest. And this signifies that they have arrived a little bit too late. They did not plant, so they have nothing to harvest. They have arrived a tad too late. And the only thing left for them to do is therefore to beg. Yes, you can come to a point in life where your life just depends on begging. You can find yourself, no matter who you are, no matter what you had, that you find yourself in a situation where you just beg in order to survive. And this story takes this turn because Naomi and Ruth knows that their fate has just been reduced to begging. You know, in this culture, in this community of Australia, it's a privileged community. This may not ring true, but in other communities, there are people who will be sitting in church this morning like you are, yet their life from Monday to Friday is just begging to survive. And this book, this story is told in every day of Pentecost up to today. Because it touches the lives of people. It shows how much suffering is real in the lives of people. At this time of the barley harvest is also the time of Pentecost. And at Pentecost, there's that covenant that happened at Sinai, which now has been extended to Ruth the Moabite. And Pentecost also is the day which they celebrate the birth of David. And the story is always read on Pentecost for those reasons. And so the story continues, and it takes two forms. We see a part that happens during the day and a part that happens during the night. And Naomi and Ruth, they settle down, and it is obvious that Ruth will have to go out and do the begging, because Naomi is just too tired. And Naomi, her character comes out, that she has resigned herself to this fate. And a mention is made of Boaz's relationship with Elimelech, although Naomi is not aware of this relationship. And therefore, Ruth is now leading this life, which is so strict and so hard. And yet, in that strict, hard life of suffering, she has so much mercy and love and openness to her mother-in-law. These two characteristics are playing in harmony in this story. And from this point on, they're going to build up to a crescendo of love and justice. This strictness, this sticking to the hard life, this path of loneliness and hardship that Ruth has taken, she picks herself and she tells her mother her plan, that I will go out and I will beg. And she goes out and she begs, and the begging was in the form of gleaning the fields of barley. And the law was that the barley was left there deliberately for those who are so poor like Naomi and Ruth to pick. And the story reminds us that in your abundance, you must remember others. You must remember that when God has blessed you with so much, just give other people deliberately. Share what God has given you. And this also brings the humility of Ruth, because Ruth actually was a princess in Moab. She was the daughter of King Egon. Just imagine. the daughter of a king, a princess now reduced to begging and gleaning in the fields of barley. If you know what a barley field looks like, it's not easy. It cuts you, and it is dirty, and it is dusty, and it was not easy life. It is a shame. She is so vulnerable. Anybody can take advantage of her. But she says to her mother-in-law that I will go and glean behind someone in whose eyes I shall find favor. She has accepted her condition, and she is open to someone's love and favor. Yes, in your condition of struggle, in your condition of trying to walk that path of righteousness, you must be open to the love of God, because it's only God who can help you. And yet, she doesn't know that she will go and glean in the field of this Boaz. And when Boaz comes to the field and finds the workers gleaning in the field, and she looks around and she asks, who is that lady? And somebody says to him that, oh, that is Ruth, the daughter-in-law of Naomi, the one who came with her from Moab. And he knows the story well, and because he knows the family. And he said, oh, that's right. And Boaz feels some warmth in him, some love for this suffering lady. And at lunchtime, he invites her to his table and actually stands up and serves her and gives her the food. And he tells him, eat all that you can and take some to your mother-in-law. And he asks Ruth, and who are you? And the answer that Ruth gives her is interesting, because Ruth says, I am a foreigner, someone unknown, not even one of your maid servants. She relegates herself to a position which is even lower than the servants. Her humility was so deep. But Boaz does not condemn her. Boaz does not take advantage of her vulnerability. Boaz does not look at her like another slave has arrived. No. Boaz looks at her and says, I have heard your story and I know you. And Boaz says that you have left your father and mother to be in a native land. Wow. Just like Abraham. And she hears herself being compared to Abraham. Wow. And Boaz says to her, may the Lord bless you, the Lord under whom you've come to seek refuge under his wings. You know, this word, under his wings, was a prominent word in this culture, where the wings were like the wings of the cherubims in the temple, in the sanctuary, and they were actually signifying the open wings, the arms of Jesus at the cross, where everybody under his wings finds love and acceptance. And there, Ruth must stand under the wings of this God and be accepted and join the community that is thereof. Ruth, the poor one, is given enough to carry home. And when she goes home and shows Naomi and tells Naomi the story of her day, the story says that Naomi blessed the day and blessed the meeting, and she prayed and she thanked God. Yes, in this story, gratitude is prominent. Everything is taken with gratitude, even suffering. Have you been in a situation, in a position where you suffer so much until the only thing left is to just thank God for another day? Yes, it is almost a contradiction of sorts, an oxymoron, that you can say that suffering can bring gratitude and thankfulness in the heart. But no matter how hard life is to be short with blessings, even when you go through so much hardship and suffering. In good times and in bad times, we are to bless the Lord. This is the lesson we learn from Naomi. She never said any bad thing about anybody. She never whinged. She never said, why me now? And I'm not going to be in this congregation anymore. And I better die. She never spoke like that. She was always thankful for what God provided for them It shows that the providence of God in every situation never fails. And Naomi continues and tells Ruth that man whom you spoke to is actually very closely related to us. He is our kinsman redeemer. And this word comes like a shock to Ruth. What is that? And of course, after Naomi has explained to Ruth what a kinsman redeemer is, he is the man who will redeem our family if he wants. He will restore all our land, and he will actually be part and parcel of this family. But according to the Torah, this duty provided that the kinsman redeemer must accept to take that responsibility. But at least there is hope. Yes, in life, life must be filled with hope for tomorrow. And Naomi says to Ruth, if he had done this much and he has treated you this well, there is hope that he will act justly. The justice comes up again, and the love that he had comes up. The two must go hand in hand. Yes, the justice of God and the love of God now comes full circle in the story, and it has to be prominent because the two are one. And we are told that until the end of the barley harvest, which was 3.5 months, Ruth lived with Naomi. And these 3.5 months can also be compared to the 3.5 years that Jesus was with the disciples, and where he worked and taught and showed them what love really means. And Naomi says to Ruth that, I want you to have security, my daughter. It is a matter of seeking security. And they hatch a plan that Ruth would go and visit Boaz at the threshing floor, and when he is asleep, he would go at the foot of where he's sleeping, and if he speaks to you, that you may have a conversation with him. And Ruth says to her mother that whatever you say, I will do. Her submission and freedom is interesting. She submits to her mother, yet it is through her own freedom and free will that she chooses to do what she's doing. Her obedience also comes through because she obeys every word of her mother-in-law. And in her simplicity and uprightness, she goes and visits Naomi during the night. And remember, Ruth is so vulnerable, and Naomi is so, and Boaz is so powerful and rich. Boaz can take advantage of her. And at night, she sneaks and sleeps there, and Boaz is asleep, and in the middle of the night, remember that word in the parable of the 5 virgins and the 5 foolish virgins and the wise virgins, in the middle of the night, Boaz wakes up and asks, who are you? And Ruth says, I am Ruth, your handmaid. Spread your robe and over your handmaid, for you are a redeemer. She is courageous and she's free, and she speaks her mind, and she tells Boaz what the law says. But it's only the love that Boaz has in his heart that will bring this plan to fruition. And Boaz says that, yes, I am the Redeemer, but there is a technicality, there is a problem somewhere. There is actually another person who is closer to you than I am. And we must give him the first opportunity to redeem your family. And even in this point, it seems that Ruth and Boaz, they want to walk in the strictness of the law. And this strict justice does not override the love. They don't want to take advantage of the rights of the other man. And he says to her, lie down until the morning without a husband, for tomorrow you will not be husbandless. You know, this is like a meeting where people came to see Jesus during the night, where Nicodemus came during the night, and Jesus spoke to Nicodemus and said that you must be born again. That is your problem, Nicodemus. Or the meeting that Jesus had with the woman at the well, the woman who was so sinful, yet Jesus did not embarrass her. Because Boaz says to to Ruth, that now you must go back, but let nobody know that a woman came to the threshing floor. They will not understand. You know, sometimes your relationship with Jesus, only you and Jesus can understand. Others may not understand. Just focus on Jesus. It is a one-on-one relationship. Because they will never understand. And therefore, Naomi goes away and she now has to wait in faith. She has got to do nothing. She's got the assurance she needed. She doesn't have to do anything. See the love that God has for us. You don't have to do anything. It all depends on Him. And everything is now vibrant, and the following day, Boaz is walking around, and Naomi tells Ruth that that man will not rest until he has done what he has promised to do. And they wait, and the kinsman who was closest is summoned to the gates of Bethlehem. And when he comes, Boaz sits down with him and says to him that you are the kinsman redeemer for this family, and you have to redeem this widow. And the man says, yes, I will do that. I will redeem the land. I will buy the land. And Boaz continues and says, no, it's not only the land. It implies that you have to also marry Ruth. And the man withdraws from this because it is going to ruin him financially. It's going to commit him. How can I just marry her like that? The love is not there. And he leaves Boaz the opportunity to proceed as a kinsman redeemer. And when this news hits town and everybody knows that Boaz now is marrying Ruth, the women praise and rejoice and says, may your house be like that of Rachel and Leah. May your house be like the house of Perez, another Canaanite woman whose story is in the Bible. And these women are all in the lineage of Jesus Christ. Yes, they are also barren women. Did you notice that in the Old Testament, almost all women in the line of Jesus were barren? They had difficulties with pregnancies. Even Ruth, by this time, her womb had not yet opened. Because the women sing that it is God who opens the womb, and all these women from Hannah to Rachel to Sarah, all of them, it is God who opened their wombs and blessed them with children. And when the story reaches its climax, the Midrash says that Boaz knew Ruth and kindled life in her womb. But the Midrash continues and says that in the very night that Boaz did this, he died. He never saw the light of day. It doesn't feature again in the story. He gave his all to Ruth. And it is the women now who give this boy a name, and they call this boy's name Obed. Obed, short form of Obed-Iyah. Obed means servant of Yah, servant of the Lord, servant of God. And this name is mysteriously the name that announces the Messiah, who Isaiah writes is Obed Adonai, the servant of the Lord. And as the story comes to a conclusion, it brings the reader to the point where you see this suffering Messiah, servant of the Lord, who comes, and his life is also full of suffering. And Ruth begats Obed, and Obed begats Jesse, and Jesse begats David, and David is the root and offspring of Jesus. And in this Jesus, we see him walk on this planet, and he goes to the cross and he saves the human race. And under his wings, we find acceptance and salvation. The Jew and the Gentile alike, the pagan and those who knew him earlier, all under one emblem, children of the living God. And if this story is to teach us anything, is that we are all equal before the eyes of the living God. And we should show this same love to all those people whom we meet every day. Because just like God was present in the lives of those people from Moab to Bethlehem, he's present in the lives of even those people who don't call his name today. May the Lord bless us with this in Jesus' name. Father in heaven, we thank you for being such a loving God. We thank you for giving us refuge, for being the God of the suffering and the despised and the downtrodden, for coming to save us all and to give us a chance to live with you forever, and to restore us to our lost inheritance and our lost heritage and the life that you had planned for us. May your Holy Spirit, whom you have given us as a guide, lead us in this path of righteousness and love. May you be with each one of us here and keep us till we meet again. For this is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.